Long before smartphones and social media took over the planet, we actually had to go outside to entertain ourselves. Maybe it's just where I live, but I rarely see kids riding their bikes or playing ghosts in the graveyard anymore. But back when I was young, anywhere from 9 to 17 years old, I was constantly outside with my friends. Near my childhood home, there was a park down the block that we used as our main hangout spot. We went there mostly at night, usually because our parents would get angry if we were too loud at the house. This park was perfect. It had a small, dense patch of woods on 3 sides, faced the street on the 4th, and even had another patch of woods across the road. Basically, it was isolated. No neighboring houses watching us, no one to call the cops if we made noise. This happened when I was about 13. That specific age where you ride your bike literally everywhere. I remember the day clearly. It was a Saturday. We had ridden to a nearby pizza place earlier, then went back to my friend Tony's house. There were 6 of us hanging out in his backyard until his mom finally came out and yelled at him. She told him to either be quiet, send us home, or go somewhere else. 3 of our friends decided to call it a night, but Tony, our friend Rob, and I weren't tired. We decided to ride to the park. It was only a 5-minute ride, and there was always something refreshing about riding bikes at night. The air felt cooler, the streets emptier. When we got to the park, we settled in. To give you a visual, the park had a small baseball field, some bleachers, a few typical benches, and a decent-sized playground with a swing set. We always hung out on the playground itself because the elevated platforms felt like a hidden fortress. We were chilling on the equipment, just talking, when Tony suddenly cut us off. "Shh. Did you hear that?" We all stopped talking instantly. We listened. When nothing happened, Tony explained that he thought he heard a footstep, or some kind of heavy thump on the playground structure. A sound that wasn't made by us. Naturally, we took a quick glance around the equipment and the dark field. We didn't see anyone. But a few minutes later we all heard it. A distinct sound. It was a heavy thud, emanating from somewhere on the physical playground itself. Now we were unsettled. We were almost certain someone else was there with us. We got up, walked around the perimeter, and even called out, "Who's there?" Of course there was no response. Just the wind. Eventually our nerves settled and we sat back down. We talked for another few minutes until we heard it again. But this time it was a much more disturbing sound. It was a voice. A child's voice. And it was coming from inside the slide, one of those old spiraling metal tubes. I'm not going to lie, when we heard it, we genuinely froze. We had heard the thumping sounds, sure, but we had not heard anyone climb into that metal tube. It would have made a massive amount of noise. I walked over to the slide and listened. I whispered, "Is someone in there?" A voice replied, "Hello." It was definitely a child. A boy, maybe a toddler. I was 90% sure they said, "Hello." My friends heard it too. We gave each other terrified looks. We had been there for 30 minutes and hadn't seen a soul. I leaned closer to the slide. "Do you need help?" No response. The silence returned. We didn't hear the voice again. I had to assume there was a little kid stuck inside. So, against my better judgment, I climbed up and slid down the tube. I expected a child to appear around the corner at any second. But I made it to the bottom, and it was empty. I stood up and scanned the ground level, looking under the equipment, checking the surrounding area. There was not a soul in sight. My friends were just as shocked as I was. It wasn't possible for someone to run away that quickly without us seeing them, especially a young child. We checked every possible hiding spot. Nothing. We were already beyond freaked out, but then we heard the voice one last time. It came from the slide again. This time it whispered, "Catch me." That was it. We bolted for our bikes. We pedaled faster than we ever had in our lives, racing back to my house down the block. We didn't stop until we were in my backyard, chest heaving, trying to catch our breath. We tried to keep our voices down so my dad wouldn't wake up, whispering frantically about what just happened and trying to find a rational explanation. But things only got stranger. Suddenly there was a knocking on the backyard gate. Not a pounding, but a polite knock, as if someone was asking permission to enter. I called out, "Who is that?" thinking maybe it was a family member. An unfamiliar woman's voice replied, "Hello." Then she asked, "Were you guys just at the park before?" We looked at each other in absolute panic. There is a tiny crack in the wood where the gate meets the fence, just wide enough to see through. I peeked through it. What I saw was a middle-aged woman standing on the other side. She had a big, wide, unnatural grin on her face. And she was looking right at me, directly through the crack, as if she knew exactly where my eye was. I stepped back, disturbed. "No, sorry." The woman replied immediately, "Are you sure?" Tony yelled out for me, "No, we weren't." The woman paused, then said, "Okay. Thanks anyway." I stepped back toward the gate to see if she had left. She hadn't. She was still standing there, smiling, staring at me through the crack. We were so terrified that we ran inside the house through the back door and locked it. We sat downstairs in the dark for hours, completely shaken. Everything about that woman, her voice, her smile, the way she knew, was terrifying. My friends were too scared to leave, so they slept over. We didn't go back to that park for a long time. If we wanted to be rational, we could say a kid ran away and his mother was looking for him. But it doesn't make sense. We rode home so fast that no one on foot could have followed us. And we know for a fact the playground was empty. So what the hell did we hear inside that slide? Who was that woman? It's a distant memory now, but I never thought a normal night at the park could turn into one of the scariest nights of my life. I live in a small suburban town, the kind where everyone knows everyone else and most people think it's safe to be outside at any time of day or night. It was a Friday night in the summer of 2018. I had just finished a late shift at work and I wanted to clear my head before going home. The local park was only a few blocks from my apartment. I used it often to jog or just walk when I needed to think. That night it was quiet. Almost too quiet. The sun had set maybe an hour before. The streetlights inside the park were buzzing on, but the main walking path still felt heavily shadowed under the canopy of trees. I remember thinking how peaceful it was as I entered. The smell of freshly cut grass lingered in the air. I wasn't expecting anyone to be there. Usually, on a weekday night, I'd be alone, or maybe I'd see a few dog walkers or teenagers on the benches. I had my headphones in, listening to music at a low volume, and started walking along the main path. At first, everything was normal. I saw a couple of dogs in the distance, some people walking slowly. It felt calm, therapeutic. But then I started noticing little things that made me uneasy. At the time, I tried to brush them off. The first thing was a man sitting on a bench not far from the path. He was wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled up tight over his head, even though it wasn't cold. He wasn't on his phone, he wasn't reading. He was just sitting, staring straight ahead. I didn't think much of it at first. People sit on benches. But as I passed him, I realized he was looking at me. He didn't move his body, didn't shift his posture. He just turned his eyes to follow me as I walked by. It made me uncomfortable, so I picked up my pace a little, telling myself he was probably harmless. I kept walking, trying to shake the feeling, but then I heard it. Footsteps behind me. I paused. The footsteps stopped. I waited a few seconds, then continued walking. They started again, matching my pace exactly. My heart began to beat faster. I told myself it was probably just someone else taking a walk. But the footsteps felt too deliberate, too in sync with mine. I decided to take a different path, one that led through a smaller, darker section of the park with fewer lights. It cut through a side trail that looped back toward the street. I figured I could get home faster that way and lose whoever was behind me. As I turned onto the trail, I glanced back. The man from the bench had stood up. He was walking in my direction. I thought maybe it was a coincidence, but something about the way he moved made me stop and stare. He wasn't jogging. He wasn't strolling. It was a slow, rigid walk. He was matching my speed without looking directly at me. I took out my phone and checked the time, then pretended to make a call, holding it up to my ear. "Hey, I'm almost there," I said to no one. The man didn't react. He didn't seem to care that I was looking at him or talking to someone. I forced myself to keep moving, trying not to panic. I thought if I went faster, he'd leave me alone. I broke into a light jog. He did the same. He kept exactly the same distance behind me. My mind raced. Why was he following me? Was he dangerous? Should I run back to the main path? I made a decision to leave the park completely. There was a street exit just ahead that led to a well-lit neighborhood. I broke into a full sprint, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. The footsteps behind me sped up, matching mine perfectly. I didn't look back. I just ran. When I finally reached the street, I slowed down and risked a glance behind me. The man had stopped at the very edge of the park. He was standing in the shadows just inside the tree line. I could see the hood over his head, a dark shape against the dimly lit path. He wasn't moving. He was just watching me leave. I ran the rest of the way home. My hands shook so badly I could barely unlock my apartment door. I thought that would be the end of it. I told myself he was just a creep, maybe homeless, maybe lonely. I tried to rationalize it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, I went back to the park during the day trying to convince myself it was safe. I walked the same path. Everything looked normal until I reached that bench. It was empty, but someone had scratched something into the wood. I couldn't make out exactly what it said. It looked like letters carved hastily, smeared as if the person didn't want them to be readable. My stomach turned. I took a picture and walked away quickly. After that, I avoided the park at night. But the worst part wasn't feeling unsafe in the park. It was the feeling that someone knew I had been there. That someone was waiting. I started noticing small things in my neighborhood. Shadows moving in the corner of my eye. A figure across the street that would vanish when I looked directly at it. A car parked down the block I didn't recognize. I kept telling myself it was paranoia. But about 2 weeks later, I decided to go jogging again in the early evening. I stayed on the main street, avoiding the park entirely. As I passed the edge of the park woods, my blood ran cold. A figure was standing just inside the tree line, barely visible. It was the same height, same build, same hood pulled up. I froze. He didn't move. But I had this overwhelming feeling that he had been there for hours, just waiting for me to pass. I ran to my car, locked the doors, and drove away, constantly checking the rearview mirror. I never saw him again in the park. But sometimes when I walk through my neighborhood, I get that feeling. That sensation of eyes on me. I've checked security cameras, but nothing shows up. I don't know if he was dangerous or just obsessed. But I know what I experienced. Even writing this now, I feel a chill. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear footsteps outside my window. Far enough away to be unnoticed by others, but close enough to remind me that I'm being watched. This event happened less than 24 hours ago. The details are still incredibly vivid in my head. I'm not even sure how to classify this story because it was so bizarre. It was the only time in my life I have ever felt like I was in immediate mortal danger. Myself and a group of 5 friends were hanging out at a popular public park in my area called The Overlook. It has a great view of downtown and the nearby universities. It was very late, around 11 p.m. It was supposed to be a chill rendezvous, just hanging out on the benches and talking. However, one of my friends mentioned he had Roman candles in his trunk and suggested we light them off. The Overlook is the worst place for fireworks, too visible. So, I suggested we go to a more secluded part of the park called The Loop. The Loop is just a few minutes away. It's basically a huge cul-de-sac completely surrounded by dense woods. You can't see anything inside the loop from the outside because of the thick tree line. We piled into 2 cars and drove over. We decided to park just outside the entrance on a nearby street, just in case anything went wrong. We walked down the long, winding driveway that cuts through the trees. As we walked deeper into the loop, we noticed several cars parked around the cul-de-sac. Their lights were off. It was strange for such a late hour, but people do hang out there, so we ignored it. Suddenly, a small truck behind us started moving. Its headlights were off. It was facing the exit, but it quickly made a U-turn and headed in our direction. We all found this weird and ducked behind some trees. The truck passed us slowly, drove around the loop, went back toward the entrance, stopped suddenly, and made another U-turn. All of our stomachs sank. It was a small truck, probably only fitting 3 people. There were 6 of us, all over 6 feet tall. Still, the vibe was menacing. For some reason, my friend thought this was the perfect time to light a Roman candle. Sparks flew in every direction. The reaction was instant. The truck turned its headlights on, high beams blinding us, and started slowly driving toward us. We ran further into the tree line, down a slope, hiding behind bushes. But the truck didn't stay on the road. It jumped the curb and drove through the grass straight toward us. Whoever was driving turned on their high beams and laid on the horn, a long, continuous, aggressive blast. We sprinted into the woods. These weren't trails. It was thick bushes and tall grass. It was difficult to move. About 20 feet in, we heard voices from the truck. Then we saw more pairs of headlights turn on back at the loop. During the sprint, we got separated. I was with 2 friends and we didn't know where the other 3 were. 2 men stepped out of the truck and sprinted down into the woods with flashlights. They were coming for us. My friends and I lay flat on the ground, trying to merge with the soil. I squeezed under a large bush. We were in a sunken part of the woods, with the road directly above us. It went quiet for a few minutes. Then we heard footsteps and saw flashlight beams cutting through the trees above. We were trapped. One group was searching from the front, another from above. We didn't understand. Why were they so angry about fireworks? None of the sparks hit their cars. Fireworks are legal here. This felt like something else. After about 15 minutes of terror, we saw the truck pull out of the grass and drive away. The other headlights disappeared. We waited. We never saw the men who entered the woods come back out. To make matters worse, one friend realized he lost his phone in the chaos. We found it quickly, but sneaking out was a nightmare. It was pitch black. We couldn't use our own lights or phones for fear of alerting them. We regrouped with one other friend who had been hiding nearby. He told us something that made my blood freeze. He said one of the men had run right past him. The man didn't see him, but my friend saw what he was holding. He was carrying a knife, or some kind of melee weapon. Hearing this, we abandoned stealth and sprinted down the road toward the entrance. That's when we saw it. The same truck from earlier. It was parked about 50 feet from the entrance, idling, waiting. Fortunately, a dense patch of woods allowed us to sneak around it. But somehow, whoever was in the truck realized we were moving. They immediately turned on their high beams and pulled the truck to the edge of the woods, trying to cut us off. We ran for our lives. The truck followed us along the road, pacing us, but we cut deeper into the thicket where it couldn't drive. Eventually, we reached a main road miles away. The truck didn't follow past the park limits. We took back roads to get to our cars to ensure we weren't being tailed. We didn't hear from our other friends for hours, but they had managed to escape too. I'm never going back to the loop. I don't know what those people wanted. I don't know why they hunted us like animals. But I'm sure it wasn't just about fireworks. It felt like a trap and we walked right into it.